Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight, I've got a friend of mine. In fact, I met him in Starbucks in Guildford about 15 years ago after I'd been trained by Will Kintish on networking. We had a chat. We found we had a lot in common and that we were both lifelong learners and were interested in helping people. Andrew's a barrister, a meditation trainer, and a police trainer. And he's been involved in some very interesting negotiations, which we've often discussed, no names and no pack drill. Andrew joined the army at 16, having left school, then left the army and became a police officer. And while he's being a police officer, he trained to be a barrister. Now he's a barrister and, as I said, a meditation trainer. Welcome, Andrew, to Monday Night Live. Thanks for joining us. Very interesting CV you have. What got you to join the army at 16? That's quite young.
I think you wouldn't join the army at 16 unless it's almost out of desperation, to be quite honest. So I missed a lot of schooling. And at 16, I really had nothing in the way of qualifications. Although I did have, it transpired that I owed the taxman money. So I joined the army, and then within 3 weeks, I was up before the pay chap, and he said to me, "There's something very strange about your record." He said, "Apparently, you owe the taxman a couple of £1,000." He said, "Well, of course, it's wrong because you're only 16." I said, "Well, actually, I wonder if we could just pay the bill, because for the past 3 years I've been working either on a removal van or down at the docks unloading ships or on the building site. So by the time I joined the army, I'd accrued this tax bill, which was my only qualification when I left school."
Wow. And what did you learn in the army? You got posted to all sorts of places. What did you learn?
Well, first of all, they teach you to shoot people, which is very considerate. But when I reflect at 16 joining up, I kind of think about it as putting myself on my feet, and it also makes you grow up very quickly. And I think it's a sort of rite of passage, which almost turns you into a man, really, because it's the resilience, it's the training. And an interesting aspect is you have uncles, and they talk about sort of development of a tribe, but you're surrounded by these really caring uncles who are the sergeants and your instructors. And it's not really like you see in the films where it's all harsh and unpleasant. I mean, it's hard, but all the instructors are concerned about developing you as a person, and they're really quite caring and considerate. So I think that was the most important aspect.
And are you able to say where you were posted to, or is that something you'd prefer not to say?
I can say I spent first 2 years in the UK and then the last 20 months in Northern Ireland. But beyond that,
no, I understand that. I don't think. Yeah. So when you left the army, you joined the police. Is that what a lot of people do? Army people?
Well, I've been in what's called the Special Investigations Branch, which was in the military. So it's a bit like a detective. Well, I was a plainclothes detective. And after you've done my tour of Northern Ireland, there wasn't really anything in the military to do. There was no other challenge beyond doing the work I'd done. So I really thought, okay, I'll then transfer to the civil police. So I came to Surrey with the intention of being a detective in the civil police, but that never occurred because I was promoted quite early to be a sergeant, and I was posted to Dorking, which was a bit Sleepy Hollow, but in those days, before the Crown Prosecution Service, the local sergeant would brief the troops, do some admin, and then you'd go down to the local magistrates court and you would prosecute the list. You were doing a lawyer's job in the court presenting cases. And I thought, oh, I quite like this. It seems very civilized after going out on the street on a Friday night and taking on the drunks and all that. So I thought, I'm quite keen on pursuing that. So first of all, I had to get an education. So I went to night school, took all my police exams. And then I began to clash with a particular senior officer who stopped me getting promoted because he said I was too outspoken, which of course was true. But I realized that as I was developing psychologically, intellectually, that the police required me to become more limited in my view. And yeah, I think I was outspoken. And once my promotion was stopped, I thought, well, I'm clearly not in the right place. So that's when I decided I'd go off to university and get a law degree with the intention of becoming a lawyer. Yeah.
How old were you then?
27.
Okay.
By then,
That's quite a thing to do, isn't it? To not get paid, give up a well-paid job with security to study at university. And how long was the studying to become a lawyer at that point?
It was a real shock to the system because although I'd been doing A-levels, that was pretty much part-time. But to go full-time studying a law degree in London, that was a bit overwhelming. And I was always doing catch-up. I never quite felt as if I was in control of anything. But that may be people's general observation about studying the law because it was a bit overwhelming. And I knew all the time that the intellectual side would be a challenge, but the minute I communicated with people, I knew I'd be okay then. So I just struggled through the study, really.
So it does seem a bit odd to me, and I'm sure it seems odd to other people, that you're a meditation trainer and studied meditation, which seems to me over here on this side of the pitch, and law on the other side of the pitch. They seem a bit diverse. Tell us what that was all about.
So coming out of Northern Ireland, so that would have been late 70s. I don't think post-traumatic stress was recognised until about 1980. So it was quite clear that I was suffering from that. First thing I did was get on my motorbike and drive. I remember riding around for about 8 months, just trying to get my head clear.
Wow.
And then I naturally took up meditation. And once I acquired sort of the processes, I then began to be curious about the psychology underlying meditation. And that's what I think that's where the overlap with the law, because if you're a lawyer, especially in my area of criminal law, you have to have an inherent interest in psychology. And so when I was looking at the psychology of meditation and Western psychology, I thought, wow, these two areas, they really overlap. And so really, it was the interest in people and their motivations and how the Eastern mystical system analyzed the psychology of individuals. And then you have the Western system, and marrying those two systems, which I think helped me enormously as a lawyer.
We'll come to one or two of the things we've discussed, but I just want to know, after studying meditation for 20 years, you took yourself off on a retreat to the Himalayas, and I know that perhaps you were married with a couple of kids at that stage. I'm not sure of the timeline. What made you want to do that?
So if you're interested in meditation and particularly the mystical system, and 20 years ago, I would never have used the term the mystical system because I didn't really understand it. There's no, it's not like going and studying a course at university where you have the prospectus and it tells you what you're going to study and how. It doesn't work like that. So the mystical system has these indicators or general direction and guidance, but it's not specific in any way. So you're almost giving your direction of travel, and then you have to go and examine that yourself. And it's like going into a landscape where you don't know what's in the landscape and you're feeling your way through. You know what the guidance is, but then you have to explore it yourself. So it's very much an internal journey of the inner landscape where you're not really sure where you're going. All you know is the general direction. And after 20 years, I began to realize that I needed better instruction. The people teaching in the West were doing it second, third hand. And I was curious to be taught by the masters of the Eastern system from there.
Yeah.
And
I get that totally. If you're doing something, go and study under the very best people in the world if you can, which is what I did at Harvard. Now, in the early days when we met and used to discuss things, you told me something which I found hard to believe, which was you go into court. You're a defense barrister normally, aren't you? You go into court, and when the jury's being sworn in, you just go into your own space and watch what's going on to see who the decision makers are. Have I got that right? Can you run that past us?
Yeah, so there's a concept which is quite familiar now to people in mindfulness. They talk about being in the present. And I've spoken to mindfulness teachers, and their being in the present and what I perceive to be in the present are quite different experiences. So when I'm in court and the jury are sworn, each member of the jury stands up. And for me, the key is to allow my mind to fall completely still. So complete stillness of mind. And I bring myself fully into the present moment. And I also calm down my subconscious. So everything is still. And then I engage in listening, but I don't listen with the mind. I park the mind. The mind is not involved in this process. And I allow the presence of the person. So I'm listening, but I'm not just listening to what they're saying, because they're all repeating the same thing. But you're listening without the mind to their presence, their history, their anxieties, their intelligence, but without thinking. And then at the end of the process, when all 12 members of the jury are sworn, naturally arising out of the contents of the subconscious is the information, which is who are the decision makers. Now, if you try and think about this process, the intellect, the conscious mind, will then be processing, and that's just getting in the way. And my belief is my subconscious has so much more intelligence, or accesses so much more intelligence than my conscious mind. So I allow the subconscious to process, and intuitively I know who the three decision makers are going to be, and usually there's about 3 people. And then knowing that, when I communicate with the jury, I'm generally communicating on the level and trying to influence the decision makers. The other people are going to fall in line behind the decision makers, but the key is that respect everyone on the jury. So you don't ignore the others, but you know the level that you're going to pitch things.
Okay, so we'll come back to the court in a minute, but I know you do some great voluntary work at the Royal Surrey Hospital with the nurses and with some of the patients on some of the pretty tricky wards. What meditation do you teach them?
So it's the Fountain Centre. So anyone who knows locally, the Fountain Centre is the alternative therapists. There's a group of them, and they are attached to the cancer ward. And cancer patients at the Royal Surrey can access all the different therapists at the Fountain Centre, and I've been volunteering there. So I go in once a week and then run meditation sessions. And it's either for the staff who are very stressed, so sometimes they'll come in and I'll run a session with them. Or alternatively, I'll go up to the ward, and so they'll close a ward of 8 patients, and then I'll run a meditation session with the patients who are normally in bed, but we try and bring them into a deeper state of relaxation, and using the techniques that I learnt in the East, change the energy in the room, and change the energy in the patients. And it's
that to me is a bit like a hypnotic trance. We're talking about accessing the same sort of area, wacky area, as I call it sometimes, when we're having a bit of fun. But that's the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, which is usually needs quite a bit of skill to access, doesn't it? You need to be relaxed and etc. for it.
So it's nothing to do with hypnosis, and I don't know anything about hypnosis.
No, it's in the same area. Just
well, what is interesting is that people can still, with some techniques, you can eventually still the mind, and you can do that. But one thing people really don't know much about is how to still the contents of the subconscious. Sure. So this is really what we're doing.
Okay, no, that's great. So let's talk about negotiations. You've had a lot of negotiations in the police, in the army, but in court, I imagine. How do you, when it comes to it, and it's pretty marginal, how do you negotiate with the judge and the jury? I guess the judge is the ultimate influencer of the jury, I guess, is he, or not?
Not really, no, because the role of the judge is to ensure there's a fair trial, and he sums the case up to the jury, but he tells the jury that they make the decisions as to the facts of the case. Now, of course, the judge is going to be influential. I mean, just the way he sums the case up is going to influence the jury. Like in the American system, the judges don't sum the case up, because it's recognized how much of an influence they can have over the jury simply by filtering information. But having said that, most judges, we have great judges in our jurisdiction. They're very fair, they're very reasonable. And if they're not, it's my job as the lawyer to appeal. But, I rarely have to go down that road. So you have the judge who you have to argue the law in front of. So when I'm arguing the law with the judge, I have to put my thinking head on, because he expects me to use logic and apply the law to the facts of the case and be very specific in my thinking. But when it comes to the jury, I don't apply my thinking, I apply my feeling, because if you speak to the jury in the way you speak to the judge, you're going to completely lose them. And it's not because they're not intelligent, because some of them are very bright, but they are making a different decision. They are using their intuition, they're applying the facts of the case, but they think in a very different way. So you've got to speak to them differently. Now, it's not a condescending way, because it's all about respecting who they are. So you adjust your approach to who it is you're talking to. And then also, say, with a witness, where you're cross-examining a witness, that's a different approach altogether. So how is it you cross-examine a witness and try and put your client's case, but also identify the fact that they may be mistaken or confused or even lying? So that's another approach that you take. And all this is being witnessed by the jury, because legal arguments tend to be in the absence of the jury, but they're still watching you perhaps debate with the judge over things. So all this has to be consistent and in some way authentic. So the jury, you don't lose the jury, because they're ultimately the deciders, and they judge and assess you. So even your body language is under observation by the jury. Now, they don't consciously think, oh, the way he touched his ear that way is an indication of something. They don't, that process doesn't take place exactly. They're present and they're watching, but constantly the subconscious is analyzing and processing. So if you're aware of the body and how they're thinking and how they're assessing you, even without knowing that they're assessing you, then you can have a far greater influence over their decisions.
No, yeah, I can see that, empathizing with all the different people in different ways. Now, you train police officers to go in the witness box, don't you? Because I know that it's a big issue and a very stressful thing for a police officer to be cross-examined, maybe a year after something happened. What do you do with them?
So when I was in the police force, my last job was in the local police college up at Mount Brown in Guildford, and I would train the police officers in law. So I was an instructor, a law instructor. And then leaving the police, and 30 years later, I now go back. And so those, mainly the detectives, and we run these courses where they are going to give evidence. And what I do is I take police officers and I get them to realize that their skill set, the skill set of a senior detective, is very similar to the skill set of a lawyer. And once I get them acting the role of the lawyer and cross-examining in court, in role play, I get them to understand that the lawyers don't actually know, especially the junior lawyers, don't know much more than the police officers. And often police officers are better at cross-examining, because some of them have had years and years of questioning suspects in police stations and have developed a skill set. Now, when you take a police officer and then put them in the role of the lawyer and say, right, have a go at that, and suddenly they realize, oh, actually, I'm quite good at this. They recognize that it's important they recognize that the lawyers are actually not that much better than they are. And there's this anxiety in the police that the lawyers are much more intelligent and they're much better educated, and they have much more status. That may well be right to a degree, but actually police officers have this great skill set, which is not that different to lawyers. And once the police officers realize this, and when I teach them the tricks of the trade of the lawyer and how the police officer can prepare for cross-examination, suddenly their self-esteem goes right up, and they realize that they're in a much better position than they thought they were. Now, if I can do that in a day with a group of police officers and completely change their perspective about their abilities, and that's great, because I still have a strong association and still a love of the police and what they do, and I love to support them, and I love to bring my knowledge of the court process and give it to them so they're better at what they do.
I know you're going to get asked this by somebody, and you may want to answer it until later.
I know it is.
Yeah, everybody wants to know what these tricks of the trade are.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. So for a police officer, it's very simple. So let's say they were witnessed an event. There's something called the issue in the case. and that's relatively straightforward. So, for example, if there's a fight and someone gets injured, then what's the issue that the defence raised? And let's say the issue is self-defence. Once we've identified the issue, then that really is what the case revolves around. And the police officer is going to be asked questions relevant to the issue. So you can almost predict what questions you're going to be asked because it's relevant to the issue in the case. And so you teach them things like this. And then in terms of cross-examining, once they realize that what they do in the police station, how they question people in the police station is just a very slight variation of what lawyers do in court, then they realize, okay, well, what questions are they going to be asked? Well, it's in a sense, it's simple. If it revolves around the issue in the case and it's relative to the defense case, it's relatively straightforward. And also things of law, what questions of law. So it takes a while to get it across, but ultimately they can predict pretty much what the area of questioning is going to be if they know certain facts. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and if they put the pieces together in the jigsaw puzzle in the right way, then it all becomes clear, but you've got to teach them how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, well, we're nearly at the end of the formal part of Monday Night Live, Andrew. One tip from you, a educated man who's spent a lot of time with dealing with people with common sense. One tip for people going forward in 2023 when we face some pretty tricky times. What would that be?
Self-awareness.
Right.
Know yourself. An old philosophical expression, know yourself. If you know yourself and face your fears, then you can pretty much face anything. Fantastic.
We've got one question at the moment in the chat box. We've got a number of questions, but one related to meditation. To what extent does the control of the breathing come into meditation?
In the early stages, it's useful to exercise. Well, I would say, having studied the science of breath, which is called pranayama, I've studied that now for 40 years, and it's a very dangerous exercise where people are taught to pause the breath, which is very dangerous. My observation would be all you have to do is watch and witness the flow of breath. Don't interfere with it. And the object, and here's the key, the object of keeping the attention on the breath is it calms the mind. That's the only purpose of breathing exercises. They get very complicated and everyone goes off on tangents and everyone wants to do wonderful things with it. In terms of the preparation for meditation, that's its only purpose. So don't get complicated. Don't pause the breath. Just simply witness the breath, allow it to calm, and that in turn automatically will calm the mind. And eventually, not eventually, after a while of watching and practicing, you then become able to calm the mind simply by control. And you don't need the breath, but breath is simply there to calm.
When you say witness the breath, do you mean if I was sitting in a chair and trying to do this, I would just be thinking about it going in and out, or visualizing it, or feeling my lungs?
Yeah, it's a good question. So you're not thinking, you're simply, if you like, people can go on my website and there's some basic exercises there. All you do is you take your awareness to the point of the nostrils where the air enters and leaves the body, and you simply feel. So if you do that now, just feel the breath.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Everybody do it. I'll put you on gallery view. Yeah.
and then here's the key is that the attention is taken away from the mind and goes to the breath. The attention is taking away from the mind. Every exercise you do in meditation is taking the attention away from the mind. And that's it. So no thinking, just witness, just feel.
But I've seen some exercises where people say, okay, switch your mind off, do a bit of meditation, think about your breathing, and then they say, how long can you keep your mind switched off for? And I know sometimes it's like 11 or 12 seconds, and suddenly the mind's working at a tangent. And I was just thinking, when a lot of high achieving people wake up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and thinking about things and think, I want to get back to sleep, which doesn't work if you try to. But, does that work as well, doing that sort of thing in the middle of the night?
Sure, because it happens to me. So what's happening is the subconscious is processing, working away. My personal belief, and from what I've studied and from what I've read in the ancient texts, 94% of our intelligence comes from the subconscious. The conscious mind is very little value to me. I mean, I use it to work, but I don't really pay it that much regard. But when you're sleeping, the subconscious is processing. That's the real form of intelligence. And inevitably, the subconscious wants to communicate with the conscious mind. The difficulty is it's speaking a different language. So you're waking because the subconscious is trying to communicate, and you wake and the ideas arise. And that's the communication. The difficulty is getting back to sleep because, of course, the subconscious is now active and the conscious mind is now engaged. So the best thing to do is write it down and then put your head back on the pillow and then witness, the pen, then witness the breath, slow the breath. And then, because you've all come, I'll tell you a secret. Okay. I'm allowed to give you secrets. I give these secrets away. If you're lying there, witness there's in the eyes, in the ridges around the eyes. If you close your eyes, you'll recognize that there's little flickerings going on, either across the eye or at the base of the eye. Now, if you close your eyes and allow that to relax, that flickering, it takes a minute or two, but you'll get there. That actually will begin to calm the subconscious, because the two are connected. So the breath to conscious level, the eyes to the subconscious level, that will calm you down.
I'm glad we're recording this so I can play it back, and some other people might want to play that part back, which is the clever bit. Andrew, we're nearly out of time. Can I thank you so much for joining Monday Night Live? And perhaps you'd remind everybody how they can contact you. I know you've got two websites. One website for people that get caught speeding around the M25 at 150 miles an hour, because that's what you specialize in, and a website also for the meditation. What are they?
So just Google Andrew Henley and either meditation or criminal barrister, and there's the two websites that will come up. And for the meditation side, there's some basic and slightly more advanced recorded exercises, which in the mystical tradition, we don't really do the recorded thing, but this was the beginning of COVID and my students couldn't gain access to me. And as you're right, I didn't have Wi-Fi, because the only reason I get Wi-Fi now is because I'm renting a property, but I don't have TV, I don't have Wi-Fi. And so at the beginning of COVID, I recorded these exercises for my students to use, and they're still there because people want to use them. So feel free. And then you can always contact me for any other guidance or advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because I see Andrew 2 or 3 times a week in very early in the morning.
Indeed.
Both larks at drinking coffee. Can I ask members of Monday Night Live to give Andrew the usual vote of thanks in the normal Monday night?
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me to come and speak, which is always a pleasure.
Which lawyers always do. Thanks, Andrew. I'm just going to stop the recording now. If you'd stay on for a bit, that would be really appreciated. Thanks so much.